Welcome to a Stepping Stones to Awareness show. My name's Caroline Stevens, and today I'm interviewing Alan M. Dransfield from up north. Alan is a freedom of information campaigner and a social watchdog. What's all that about then, Alan? Over to you.
Yeah, very good question. I am a social watchdog and a freedom of information campaigner. First of all, Caroline, thank you very much for allowing me to come on your program and giving you the information that's not available from the freedom of information. As I say, I'm a freedom of information campaigner and a social watchdog because I believe, and I also believe that I have the evidence to support my claims that the Freedom of Information Act 2000 and the Environmental Information Regulations and the Data Act is being attacked by dark forces. Well, not such dark forces that we don't know. I know about it, and I am convinced that the Information Commissioner, Elizabeth Denham, and the psychopath before her, Christopher Graham, the choir boy, are nothing but Tory party gatekeepers, and they are intent on gagging Joe Public from obtaining information. The reason I say that, there is on file, and anything that I say to you on this program this morning can be verified by a simple Google search. I am also the United Kingdom's court president on vexatious decisions, vexatious requests, because I attended a upper tribunal information rights hearing in London on the 28th. No, it's before then. The actual decision was made on the 28th of January 2013. And to cut a long story short, the Information Commissioner at that time, Christopher Graham, maintains that my freedom of information request to my local authority at that time, which was Devon County Council, where I've lived for the past 26, 27 years, was vexatious.
What does vexatious? Can you give me the definition of vexatious, please, Alan?
Yes, indeed, I can. The vexatious definition in the English dictionary, the Webster dictionary, is troublesome, irksome, of little value, or I suppose a similar word would be frivolous. But that is a very good question. You've kicked off on a very good question there, Caroline, because there is no legal definition. And so people will think, well, how is this guy, this Dransfield Freedom of Information campaigner from up north, how can he be the vexatious court president, which I am, and without legal definition? I went before the upper tribunal, Judge Whiteley, who claimed that my request, my freedom of information request, was vexatious, troublesome, manifestly unreasonable. And I appealed that to the Court of Appeal, and they upheld that decision. So they have now in place the Dransfield vexatious court president is in essence the golden, not the golden, I always call it the golden, it's the silver bullet for any particular rogue public authority, which indeed there are plenty. I would say that most, if not all, public authorities up and down this country, and for those people that's not au fait with public authority, your local borough council, your county council, your tax office, police, etc., that's a public authority, and they found this silver bullet to gag Joe Public. Basically, that's what it is, and to stop the Joe Public getting the information that they need for whatever reason. The motive is freedom of information requests are motive blind, or they should be. So that's what it's all about, Caroline.
Well, actually, have you ever heard of common purpose?
Yes, indeed, I have. And common purpose, along with our good friends, the Freemasons, are the ruination of this country, if not the world.
I know
And there's
that.
not.
Well, I was going to say, I know that on the common purpose side of things, people have asked, they've used the Freedom of Information Act to establish who has been on a common purpose course, and apparently since a certain year, was it 2010, 2014, that we've not been able to obtain a list of current people on those courses simply because it contravenes now data protection. That's the argument that's been thrown back at us.
Well, yes, to that extent, they're right, because it's a joint request you've gone in, actually, a freedom of information request, but you're asking for personal data. What I would say, the way round that is to ask the freedom of information request again. Do not ask for names, but ask, for example, the Devon County Council, and I would word this, under the Freedom of Information Act 2004, please tell me how many of your staff and the job titles are who have attended common purpose. Then you are not asking for personal information, and then they can't deny it.
Right, so that's just looking for groups of individuals, effectively.
Absolutely.
But I think a lot of my people like to know the individuals, when they're in positions of power, like, for example, Cressida Dick.
Absolutely. But unfortunately, the way the situation is at this moment in time, you won't get that because it's personal information. But having said that, there may well be a way around it, because 2 years ago, there was a very important European Court of Human Rights. I'm remembering this all from my mind without the notes. Magyar, Magyar, Magyar Helsinki Bizottság. It was a Hungarian, spelled Bizottság, something like that, Bizottság. And they were in a similar situation where they were asking for information to the Hungarian government, and they didn't get it. And they said, you can't have it because of the data protection. And the European Court of Human Rights overruled this and said, no, if it's police, ambulance and people there with an ID and number, you must give it. So that might be a loophole or a way around it. But getting back to this situation, I believe, without a doubt, the 8,500 vexatious decisions, all based on the Dransfield vexatious court authority, it's preventing people getting the information. And I'll just give you one clear example. There was a dear father in Kent, and when I say a father, I don't mean a preacher, a dear father in Kent, whose daughter died being transferred from an ambulance to another hospital, who needn't have been transferred, and she died in the transfer. And he asked the information locally, and he didn't get it. And he asked via Freedom of Information to the Kent Ambulance Authority, or Kent's National Health Service, and they said, no, you can't have it because in line with Dransfield section 14.1, you're vexatious. And that's what they're doing when they, and to my mind, it's a rogue public authority. That is a rogue public authority. Another one from the top of my head, 30 Gurkhas, and look at the wonderful history we have with the Gurkhas in our military over the years. They were being repatriated against their will. Talk about another Windrush part 2. 3 or 4 years ago, and they wanted some information about their repatriation, etc., and the possibility to stop. They couldn't get it. They put a Freedom of Information request into the MOD. Yes, you've guessed it. No, in line with Dransfield, you're vexatious, you can't have it. And this is what's happening time and time and time again. As I say, 8,500 at the last count. And this flies in the face of the Freedom of Information Act, because Tony Blair, or shall I call him Tony Liar, the fraudster that he is. I do hope you don't mind me speaking strongly about these people. I don't pull any punches, because that's what he is. He said, look at us. We've got no secrets. Indeed, you can come and ask any, and that's why we've introduced the Freedom of Information Act. That was back in 2000, and only less than 1 year ago, in his autobiography, he admitted that was the worst thing he'd ever done. So the Freedom of Information Act, if it is left alone, it works perfectly. But going back, what was the lady's name from The Guardian that did the Labour MP's expenses? Anyway, her name is not important. She exposed them through the Freedom of Information Act. So obviously at that time, that was before the Dransfield vexatious situation. They needed a system to get out of this and to stop Joe Public getting information. So they all got together in their little wine bar, Christopher Graham and Graham Frank Smith, his deputy, and the Tories, because it's the Tories that's involved. Oh, let's have another whiskey and a wine. How can we get rid of these vexatious Joe Public? We must get rid of them because then they're getting to know where we can cheat, etc., etc. Excuse my little interpretation there. And they said, yeah, I know how we can do it. We've got this Dransfield guy coming before the Court of Appeal, before the upper tribunal shortly. We'll bang him with a vexatious, and we can use that all the time. And that's what's happened. So what I'm saying is very, very serious. And that's why I went to the Court of Appeal and they upheld it. And now people may well say, well, look, Dransfield, the upper tribunal have found you vexatious and the Court of Appeal have found you vexatious. So you will have to accept this. And yes, I would accept it if I thought it was true. But what I'm saying, and I say this very, very strongly, very, very fervently, no person could have made such a decision as my being vexatious if they were applying the right and proper mind. So conversely, they must have been applying a corrupt mindset. And I will just quote, this went to the Court of Appeal. And I sat before three ladies from the top of my mind. In the chair was Lady Justice Arden, Lady Justice Malkier, and Lady Justice Gloucester. Lady Arden is now, she's been promoted to the Supreme Court. So if you screw up in the Court of Appeal, you move on to the Supreme Court.
But that's the way things go these days. If you're useless at your job, you go higher and higher, don't you? And you've got the revolving door situation as well, which you must have come across. Absolutely.
And not only the revolving door, you've got the laying in the same bed and peeing in the same pot. And that's what happens. And we can talk and we can do one of our shows on the corruption. And that is exactly what's happening. All the government departments, when I say all, most, if not all, are using the Dransfield get out of jail free card, because that's what it is. And I digressed a fraction. I quote the Court of Appeal, Lady Justice Arden. She said, "I consider that the emphasis should be on an objective standard and that the starting point is that the vexatiousness primarily involves making a request which has no reasonable foundation, that is, no reasonable foundation for thinking that the information sought would be of value to the requester or to the public or any section of the public." How can a person, a chair lady, a lady justice who is now a Supreme Court, make that statement? How does she know? She's got no technical expertise, because my original Freedom of Information request was for a pedestrian bridge in Devon, the Exeter Chiefs rugby ground, which I knew was not provisioned with lightning protection. So there is a serious compromise of public safety to anyone using that bridge. The worst case scenario is 10, 15, 20, 500 people could be on that bridge at any given time during a match day. Lightning comes, bang, one person could be killed, 50 people could be killed, 200 people could be killed. Has it happened so far? No. Could it happen? Yes. Was the bridge provisioned with lightning protection? No. And I have concrete evidence, because later on I actually got the information that I was seeking, which was what they call the as-built health and safety file. And for those people that are listening and watching that are not sure what the health and safety file is a document the same as you get if you buy a new television, a new cooker, a new car. You get the book of words. And the same for
You mean the guarantee? You mean the
No.
What's the book of words?
The book of words is the manual, how it works and what happens.
Right, okay.
So the as-built health and safety file for any particular project, whether it be a new school, new bridge, public works, it is obligated, it is mandatory to to have this as-built health and safety file.
But presumably, when you've got, for example, building new houses, that's why you're covered under the NHBC Council, isn't it?
Absolutely, that is a slightly different matter, but because most of these houses are for private ownership and private clients, and for obviously members of the general public to buy something. But let us just stick for a moment, please, if we may, Caroline, with public works, which is hospitals, and all the PFI contracts. That's another subject by itself, the fraud and corruption in there, and the Carillion going bankrupt. It's balmy. But millions of pounds, for example, there are 6 PFI schools in Devon that was built under the PFI, the Private Financed Initiative. And when they were built and finished, they had or should have had a mandatory as-built health and safety file, which will tell you where the wood came from, where the tiles came from, where the plumbing came from, specifications for this, electrical, everything about the project is there. And that's what I was asking for on this particular road, pedestrian bridge, because I knew that if I was able to get this as-built health and safety file, it would prove without a shadow of a doubt that this bridge did not have any lightning protection. And sure as eggs is eggs, I have now got that manual, and when you run through it, it's probably a 300-page. Lightning is not even mentioned one single time.
Can I stop you there a minute? Can I stop you there? Because we've got a precedent, really.
Stop you
in Italy, I was in Italy in the summer, and of course, we lost a bridge, didn't we? In Italy. So it does happen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that was a completely, you're quite right, and that is the president, and that wasn't lightning, that was completely and utterly, and I don't know what's happened to it. I've been following it. But I, for one, will stand up and say that was criminal negligence without a shadow of doubt. It should not have happened.
No.
Was it foreseeable? Yes, of course it was foreseeable. So if it's foreseeable, was it avoidable? Yes, of course it was avoidable.
I know somebody who went across that bridge a couple of days before it actually happened, and they said they felt that bridge moving quite dramatically. So it was obviously a rickety bridge, so there is no excuse at all. And several people should be culpable.
Absolutely, and we very hear that word these days, Caroline, and it should be absolutely culpable. And these people need to be started to be locked up. I mean, basically, what has happened to this once wonderful country of ours? We've been taken over by bent judges. We've been taken over by bent barristers. And for example, would you believe that 98% of the 16,400 QCs in this country are not authorised to conduct litigation?
98%, is that because they don't know anything about common law?
Well, that could well be, but the major reason that they are not able to conduct litigation is they have not paid the Standards Authority Board, who are the regulatory body of the QCs, the £90 for the permit to authorise them for. So at this moment in time, you've got 16,400 barristers in the United Kingdom, and as we speak, they will all be standing there before the judge in their silks, and they shouldn't be there. And incredibly, the Attorney General, Clive Jeremy Cox, who conducted litigation only 2 weeks ago by doing that six-page legal advice for Brexit, he wasn't authorised to do that. No wonder he didn't want to go into full detail. And his actions and his legal advice to that idiot woman, Theresa May, left the whole government in contempt of Parliament. I mean, that is incredible. And he, the Attorney General, is not authorised to conduct. And that's, you could do a very simple check on that. Go into the Solicitors Board regulation.
Yeah.
There's a little box in there, and you can put in their name. It'll come up and it'll tell you what they can do and what they can't do. And he's one of them. and in actual fact, 98% of 16,400 is a lot of bloody QCs that are not supposed to be conducting litigation.
So can I just interrupt you there again? So they're supposed to pay £90 to this board, to this association, this council, each year as like a subscription.
Absolutely.
And presumably, I mean, I used to be a teacher, and you subscribe and you're supposed to have continuing professional development throughout your teaching career. Are you saying that these guys and girls are not actually continuing with their CPD then?
I am saying what they're doing, without a doubt, they're not paying their £90 a year, but it's not preventing them from going into court on a daily basis, as they do, to conduct litigation. And I'll give you another clear example of that. Only 6 months ago, I appeared at Lincoln Magistrates Court, where I tried to laying an information. And I'm sure you're aware, but for listeners and viewers that are not aware, laying an information anyone can do, a private prosecution. I was bringing a private prosecution against the Lord Mayor of London, Balfour Beatty, and several other people for the Grenville fire. And the Lord Mayor of London, London Legacy, sent up a barrister to Lincoln, which there was no need to do, because all I was laying an information. I was summoned before the court, which wasn't necessary. But he felt that I need to go there, and I laid down my information, and I'm saying, look, the Grenville fire is a serious issue. There's people that's been killed there. There's criminal negligence, and I'm wanting to lay an information. And to cut a long story short, the county court judge kicked me out of court, and the guy they sent up, I forget his name now because I wasn't going to go down this route this morning.
I was going to say we were going to do Grenfell Tower in part 2. Yeah,
but they issued, I think it was £3,000 costs against me, which I eventually got kicked into touch. But that's just the system, you know. Obviously, the county court and the London Legacy and the London Mayor, we'll send a barrister up there. That'll put the frighteners on him, and that's what happened. But you're quite right. Just stepping back to the freedom of information, it is amazing, absolutely amazing, who is using the Dransfield vexatious court precedent. The Attorney General.
Can I just ask you about the vexatious Dransfield precedent? What year was this implemented?
It was implemented. It came into a statute, and the decision was promulgated, as they call it, on the 28th of January 2013.
Right. Okay. Yes, you did mention that before. Actually, I've made a note of that. So everything since then. How does that impact things since then?
Well, it impacts things then, because then they have the silver bullet. The Dransfield vexatious is the silver bullet. So if Nottingham County Council get a freedom of information request from Joe Public, they don't want to answer because it might be for child sex abuse. It might be for something that they don't want to wash their dirty laundry in public. All they need to do, and they're doing it, they cite to the requester, no, you can't have this, in line with section 14.1 and the court president, Dransfield versus the Information Commissioner, and they will cite the number GIA 3037 2011, because that was when it went from the upper tribunal to then above the highest court. So that is what's doing it. And it's absolutely incredible. And if I may, I will just give you a little brief on 4 or 5 key. And of course, the main one at this moment in time, I claim that the Dransfield vexatious one is the number one court of authority, which it is. And there's much documentation on this. But the other most important freedom of information that is open at this moment in time is one from the London School of Economics, and this is all from my memory, Professor Nigel Ashton. He put in a request, I think it was in 2015, for information on the Lockerbie bombing and the relationships between Tony Blair and the other clown, John Major, in subsequent governments. Now, to my mind, that is a very, very serious possibility. And I'm amazed that the guy, this Professor Nigel Ashton, won his case. In July this year, a Judge Whiteley from the upper tribunal upheld a first-tier tribunal decision that his request, Professor Ashton's case, request was not vexatious, and then the ICO appealed to the upper tribunal, and the upper tribunal dismissed the ICO appeal, and they said you must give Professor Nigel Ashton the information on the Lockerbie bombing and the relationships with Tony Blair and John Major since then.
Can I just ask you, what is the answer to the relationship between Tony Blair and John Major? Because obviously they're both staunch Remainers. So there's obviously,
yes.
John
yes.
Major's a member of, is it the 300 Club?
Yes. But in this particular issue, there is no connection whatsoever to Brexit on this Freedom of Information request. The Freedom of Information request from Professor Nigel Ashton of the London School of Economics, he's a scholar that's working on the relationships of the Lockerbie bombing, because a lot of people are still not happy with the situation, the conditions, and the truth. And you remember the situation with David Kelly, the guy that was found who committed suicide. Well, that's another story, and it's a program by itself.
Well, did he commit suicide? I think he didn't, did he? He was killed.
No, I don't think he did, because if you commit suicide and you're left-handed, you don't cut your left wrist. That's just one of the.
No.
Well, do you? I mean, if you was going to commit suicide now, which wrist would you cut?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
The opposite one, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
And that's just one of them. So there are a lot of people out there that would like to know the truth on the Lockerbie bombing, and the truth with the connection with John Major and Tony Blair. They were subsequent prime ministers following the Lockerbie bombing, and the relationships with that despot, psychopath, Colonel Gaddafi. So this information has been kept secret. But, and fair play and fair credit to Professor Nigel Ashton, and the upper tribunal judge said, you must release this information within 30 days, otherwise we will find you, the Cabinet Office, you being the Cabinet Office, run, I claim at this moment in time, by two more psychopaths, Gavin Barlow, who has got blood on his hands from the Grenville fire, and David Liddington, the Secretary of State for the Cabinet Office.
Who's Gavin Barlow? Yeah, sorry.
Gavin Barlow is a director of the Cabinet Office. He was the former Minister of Housing who got moved across because he screwed up so badly on the Grenville fire. He disregarded the safety regulations and the concerns of the general public and before the fire. So what did the lunatic Theresa May move him, as she does with all these people? Just move them. Look what she's done with Amber Rudd. Amber Rudd screwed up while she was Secretary of State for the Home Office with the Windrush, and then she puts her in charge of where she is now.
Well, Amber Rudd didn't do too badly. She still got invited to the Bilderberg conference earlier on in the year, didn't she? So they're obviously supposed to make these mistakes.
Well, I don't think they are. And I don't think, I'm certain that if Gavin Barlow had done his job, is it Gavin Barlow? Barwell, beg your pardon, Gavin Barwell. If he'd done his job properly, there wouldn't be at least 80 bodies accountable for.
Well, that's just a very conservative estimate. I know people who've been working on the Grenfell Towers, and I know this is for our part 2 show, but certainly the government had originally released a number, I think it was 72, but they kept finding the bodies, but the workmen had to sign the Official Secrets Act, and they weren't allowed to disclose. So they were moving up the layers of the tower and putting the scaffolding up, and then the police then came in and counted more bodies.
Absolutely, and we'll discuss that later. But that's just one of the things. And had Gavin Barlow done his job properly, this wouldn't have been an issue. But just getting back, I will give you a couple of two or three briefs of who is using this. And as I'm saying, the Crown Prosecution Service have used it. The Ministry of Justice have used it. The Attorney General's used it. The Home Office have used it. And the one I've got here, there's a couple. The Home Office. The complainant requested information from the Home Office relating to two cases listed in the Animals for Science Regulations Unit Report 2014, which had been referred to the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, you have to say, looking at that, that is a straightforward, benign freedom of information request. The Home Office, no, you can't have it. In line with Dransfield, you're vexatious. So that's where they've used the silver bullet. The London Fire Brigade. I won't give you, I mean, I can give you reference numbers and dates for this, but it will take too much time up from the show. But this one, the London Fire Brigade. The complainant has requested the full names, positions and direct email addresses of members of staff at London Fire Brigade. The Commissioner's decision is that the London Fire Brigade has correctly applied Section 14.1. In line with Dransfield, you can't have it. So whatever reason that requester needed that information was straightforward. It was perfectly benign. Why didn't the London Fire Brigade say, no, you can't have it because it's data? No, they used the Dransfield vexation silver bullet.
So basically your case, to cut a long story short, basically your case has huge implications for getting the truth out of any of these councils, the fire service, the government, and it's all down to you, Alan.
Absolutely, and 110%, Caroline, correct. And that is a very heavy cross for me to bear, because people are seeing this name Dransfield. You can't have it because of Dransfield vexatious, and it will give you the reference number, and that's only the amount of decisions we know, 8,500 and still counting. So January 2013 to now is five and a half years. 8,500 plus, that's Information Commissioner has declared vexatious. She and the psychopath before her are not doing what it says on the ICO 10. They are the government gatekeeper, and they are blocking Joe Public. So every time the Dransfield vexatious decision is used, you're quite right, it is actually denying people, UK citizens, their civil and human rights. It is as simple as that.
Well, I think Tony Blair has obviously, as you say, regretted arranging for this Freedom of Information Act in the first place, and now it's just the way of government clawing it back, their powers. Because remember, I met Dominic Grieve in his constituency surgery in April, and he went at length to tell me that Parliament was sovereign and they can do what they want. So yeah. I'm just saying that these shows are going to hopefully prove that these parliamentarians are going to be held to account. And in actual fact, it's like a pony show. It's actually the people that are sovereign, and we need to take back our sovereignty.
I couldn't say it any better. Also, bear in mind that Dr. David Lidington, I don't think he's a doctor of medicine, but he is the Secretary of State for the Cabinet Office. He is also, and this is very, very interesting, he is also the Lord Chancellor for the Duchy of Lancaster. And for the people out there, the viewers and the listeners that don't know who the Duchy of Lancaster is no other than Queen Elizabeth. So we have a situation, and David Lidington has got primacy, has got sole remit to control and make any amendments to the Freedom of Information Act. Hang on, that doesn't sit right.
Are you saying one person has got David Lidington?
Dr. David Lidington has got sole remit to make any amendments to, and I can send you the document on that, to the Freedom of Information Act. The Freedom of Information Act, the Information Commissioner's Office, who are the policemen, the oversight authorities, they're supposed to be independent. How can they be independent when the chief, one of the whips, I know he's not a whip, but he may as well be, has got sole responsibility, and we still 17, 18 years later, after the enactment of the Freedom of Information, we do not have definition for vexatious, because I mean, okay, you may have a situation here where David Liddington goes and he has a walk round Buckingham Palace to look at the garden and do his Lord Chancellor affairs, but the Queenie might be saying, "Well, David, what do you think, my dear? Who is this Dransfield vexatious fellow up in Boston? He's a bit of a bore. Can't we do something about him? Because it's not right, David. We need to control these peasants. And the vexatious Dransfield is wonderful at the moment in time. Now, David, you must do something about it. Now, come on, get on with it."
Actually, we could do a spitting image show on this. I don't know if you... I'm going off at a tangent myself now. I interviewed a chap called Cliff Taylor earlier on in the week, and he was one of the voices for Spitting Image. So I think maybe we should produce a few shows on this with the vexatious matters. So, Alan, because let's wrap this show up, and then what we don't uncover in part 1, we shall uncover in part 2. What would you like the viewers back home to take on board with your comments, really, today, your facts?
Well, what I would like them to do is to, if necessary, write to their MPs with regard, because there will be thousands of people out there that are putting a Freedom of Information request to their local authority for whatever reason, and the reasons and the motives do not matter, and they've been denied this. So they've been denied their civil and human and legal rights. And they need to complain to their MP or their local council that there's something wrong, because...
Alan, can I interrupt you there? You do realise, I'm sure I'm not teaching, I'm hoping I'm not teaching grandmother to suck eggs. But
I'm not a grandmother. I'm not a grandmother and I'm not an old dog, so don't go down there.
81% of correspondence doesn't get acknowledged these days from the MPs.
Yes. Unfortunately, yeah, that is right. And my MP, Ben Bradshaw, he actually banned me from going to his Friday night surgeries in Exeter.
Really?
And the health and safety executive put a lifetime ban on me for sending emails.
Wow. Well, if we didn't live in such a corrupt system, we wouldn't need to spend our time and energy and money on doing this sort of thing. So really,
Absolutely.
we need to be actually grouping together outside constituencies now. Then that seems to be, whether it's wearing a yellow vest or not. Perhaps we now we've got a system in this country where we can lobby the bobby. Well, presumably we can lobby constituency surgeries, can't we? In groups.
Well, maybe something like that needs to be done, because this Dransfield vexatious silver bullet. But having said that, I think there's a better way round it, because this needs to be challenged in the Supreme Court, which incidentally I did challenge it to the Supreme Court, and I have their written decision back to me saying no, there is no legal argument to your case. Hang on. There's no legal argument to my case, so why did it go to the ICO, the first tier tribunal, the upper tribunal, the Court of Appeal, but then when I wanted to go to the Supreme Court, no, they kicked me out.
Right.
Also,
okay, yeah.
Also, the European Court of Human Rights, they also kicked me out, so I took this all the way to Europe. I couldn't take it any further.
Alan,
And the gatekeeper there, I forget her name, it'll come to me. She said, no, you can't enter any further because we're one document short, and I'm going to destroy your file now. Listen to this, I'm going to destroy your file and you resub. So I emailed her, said, no, please don't destroy my file, my bundle of files. But okay, I gave way, and it took a little while. I resent my bundle, and she did this to me 3 times. And then, when my time limit had expired, because I kept resending, she said, no, your time limit now to the European Court of Human Rights has now been, you've overstretched the limit, the time limit, and we won't speak to you anymore. Case closed.
Okay, so to the people back home, this is the state of play now in this world even, or in Europe. And all those people complaining that we must stay in the EU because this is such a beneficial system to us. It's not helping us at all. So we always say justice deferred. No, justice delayed is justice denied. And the people of the UK want justice. So Alan, thank you so much for coming on this show. And I look forward to seeing and speaking to you on part 2. And to the viewers back home, thank you so much for watching another Stepping Stones to Awareness show. I'm Caroline Stevens, and today I've been interviewing Alan M. Dransfield on the vexatious issue. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much, and goodbye.